How can we judge the morality of our actions? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is St. Joe Society podcast. The St. Joe Society is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men order all things to Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at stjosephsociety.org. This is the Intro to Moral Theology, episode 16. All right, fellas, in our Making Moral Decisions unit of this Intro to Moral Theology, we're at our final episode this month before we turn our attention to conscience and freedom, our final 2 months of the course. What we're going to talk about today is the morality of human actions. We're going to try to answer the question, how do we judge the morality of our actions? And in theory, you could extend this to other people as well. Last week, we talked about the steps that went into making a choice, right? You consider the ends, you consider the means, and then you have to execute your act. And so we talked about how to analyze those steps, to reflect upon them so that we can make good choices in the future. And when we make bad choices, we can reflect back on say, okay, what went wrong? What we're talking about this week is the morality of actions. Now, what you guys will notice is everything we've learned up to this point about the human act is going to culminate into this. Now, one of the first objections I want to address that I actually didn't put in my notes, but I figured it's worth saying. When Jesus warns us against judging, a lot of students will ask me this when we start going into this. They'll say, well, we're not supposed to judge. Well, Jesus doesn't say we're not supposed to judge, okay, because that would be impossible because he makes judgments, and we, of course, have to make judgments. He does, however, strictly warn us against making rash judgments, okay? And the reason why he does is because to accurately judge, especially another person, of what they're doing, okay, you have to know a lot about their situation. And he wants us to kind of, in a manner of speaking, pump the brakes when we judge people and not get too far ahead of ourselves because it's very easy to misjudge, okay? And he doesn't want us leveling a standard to other people we don't extend to ourselves either, okay? To understand why Jesus would warn us not to judge, I think after the podcast today, you guys will see why. Because there's 3 elements that go into making an accurate moral judgment of someone's act. And as you'll see that though these 3 things are easy to understand in themselves, you guys won't have any issue of like understanding what these concepts are. When you try to apply them to another person, I think you guys will see why we need to be a little bit more cautious and gracious with people when they do wrong, okay? So that's just a little qualifier at the beginning, but let's just jump right into it. All right, the morality of a human act. So whether a human act is right or wrong is dependent upon 3 things, okay? The object chosen, the end or intention, and the circumstances. Now, when I say the moral object, I try not to load this podcast up with technical language, but I might fall into it accidentally or on purpose. The moral object is just the thing you're doing, okay? So right now I'm recording a podcast. That is a moral object, okay? So it's just the thing you're doing. So what you're saying, thinking, doing, whatever you're doing, that's the moral object. The end or the end in view or the intention is what is my intention for this object? And then finally, we have to consider the circumstances around it, okay? The object, intention, and circumstances make up the sources, or we could say the elements of the morality of a human act. So when you're judging a human act, you have to look at all 3 of these, okay? Now, I'll return to this in a second, but I'll say it in the at the onset. For a moral act to be good, all 3 of these have to be good, not just one, all 3. If any one of them is missing or bad, the whole thing's out, okay? So let's get that out of the way here. All right, so let's talk about the moral object first. The moral object is the what that you're doing, okay? So the object chosen is the good towards which the will deliberately directs itself. So the thing that you're doing, the thing that the will's directed towards, that's the moral object, okay? The moral object has to be good in itself. Now, one interesting question that pops up is, are human actions always good or bad? Or is there such a thing as indifferent actions? Okay. Let me give you an example. Someone might say something like, giving money to the poor is always a good act. Okay. They might say, murdering your neighbor is always a bad act, but brushing your teeth is a neutral act. Okay. Something like that. there's some people think that acts are neutral. Thomas Aquinas actually says that every single particular human act is either good or bad. And the reason I'm going to go on this little side step here for a second, this little rabbit trail, because I think it's really important for you guys to reflect upon. Thomas Aquinas says every human act is a moral act in the sense of every human act is good or bad once we choose to do it. So when we think about something like murdering innocent people in the abstract or the particular, it's always bad. Giving money to the poor in the abstract, good. Okay. Brushing teeth in the abstract, when you just think about brushing teeth, that doesn't seem like it's a moral action. It's just like, or going to bed, right? That doesn't seem like a moral action. It's just, morally neutral. Thomas says it's true it's morally neutral when you just think about the activity on its own, like brushing your teeth, like there's no moral quality to it. However, once someone chooses to brush their teeth, it becomes a moral act. And the reason why he says this, I think, is really, really important. Every single act we do is done under a set of circumstances, okay, with an intention. So every act you choose to do is moral in the sense of even brushing your teeth can be immoral in the sense that you could do it at the wrong time and in the wrong place. So I'll use an absurd example, but let's say you're sitting at a wedding, right, in the crowd, and you're like, oh man, I forgot to brush my teeth. But lucky for me, I have my toothpaste and toothbrush in my jacket pocket. So you just whip out the toothbrush, put the stuff on there, and start brushing your teeth. That would be an immoral and rude thing to do because of the circumstances. Okay. So notice here that now not brushing your teeth, say before you go to bed at night, might be immoral, maybe very small. So, okay. I'm not saying it's some grave sin or something, but taking care of your hygiene, right, and stuff like it's important. Take care of your health. It's a morally good thing to do that. It's a morally bad thing not to. So in that sense, brushing your teeth can be morally good when you do it at the appropriate time. Okay. So there's not neutral actions because everything we do is always in a particular set of circumstances and a particular time. Okay. So everything we do to guys is moral in that sense because everything we do is either contributing to our good and our neighbor's good, or it's taking away from it. Even things as mundane as brushing your teeth. Okay. So that's first thing. So what do we want to do first? What's our first rule here? Keep the moral objects good. Whatever it is we're doing, make sure they are good. And if we're doing anything that's morally neutral, make sure the circumstances permit us doing it. Okay. All right. Second, let's say what you're doing is good because you're a good guy and you're making good choices. Sweet. Second thing we have to consider is your intention. Now, the intention is the aim or objective of a course or action. So you'll say, this is the thing I'm doing, and here's why I'm doing it. So the intention gives it direction, okay? The intention is targeted at a goal. The goal can be good or evil, okay? It's the why I'm doing this thing. Your intentions must be good. There's two rules to govern intentions. The first is you have to keep your intentions good. For something to be morally good, both your action, the moral object, right, the thing you do, and your intention must be good. Giving money to the poor can be sinful, okay? If you give money to the poor just because you want your pastor to think you're the dude, or you're trying to impress some cute girl or your wife, that's a bad intention. Jesus actually explicitly talks about this with the Pharisees, right? They stand on the corner and they do good deeds, right? They pray, they fast, they do it with the wrong intentions, and it spoils what they're doing. So guys, we need to keep our intentions good. Second thing, and this is ridiculously important, and we might explore this in great detail later, but the end do not justify the means. See, what you can't say, dude, this is a moral dogma, okay? There ain't not allowed to go against this. What you can't say is like, I have my ultimate goal is good. The means I'm going to get there is bad, but I'm going to justify doing this wrong thing because what I'm going to get out of it. You will hear this a lot in people like around the pro-choice, the abortion debates, right? They'll say, well, yeah, killing the unborn child's usually bad, but in this circumstance, to save the mom's life, it's okay. That is the end justifying the means. That's a big no-no. Okay. Now, whether we get to it in this course or maybe I'll reserve it for a later course, we'll talk about what's called action theory, where I can teach you guys some of the stuff on how to handle those tougher situations. Maybe we'll explore it before the end of the course. Maybe I'll pitch it to some future series, but the ends don't justify the means. All right, last thing. Let's say you have a good end and you have a good means. The circumstances and the consequences that come with it are secondary elements. So the most important thing is, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Make sure those two things are good. However, circumstances can increase or diminish the moral goodness or moral evil of acts. Okay. So the circumstances do pepper it. So let's say something simple like killing an innocent person. The circumstances around that killing does change the moral quality. If it's done where a person planned it out and they had 6 months to think about it and they had all this elaborate stuff, in a sense, that's worse, right? Than in a heat of passion where someone gets in an argument, they lose their temper, they kind of lose their mind when they lose temper and kill someone. It's both examples of murder. It's more grievous to have all this calm, collected planning than it is to have a fit of passion, because we've all been emotional before and did dumb stuff, right? So the circumstances cater. It's still wrong no matter what, okay? But it does raise and lower it. I'll stick with murder. It's sort of a dark podcast today, I guess. The age of the person, their innocence matters, right? Even our courts of law take these things into consideration. So circumstances do matter. They're not going to change the moral quality of the act, okay? But they do raise and lower it on a spectrum, okay? Because for example, you can't have a good circumstance to make something that's intrinsically evil, like fornication and killing innocent people, adultery. You can't make those good based on circumstances. So it doesn't change it, but it does rise and lower your culpability. Okay. Culpability is a fancy word for responsibility. All right. So let's kind of wrap a bow around this because we're starting to butt up against our time. Okay. A morally good act, as I said in the outset, morally good act requires the goodness of the object, the end, and the circumstances. Okay. All three of these must be good. One error I'm going to warn you against, and I'm not going to be able to elaborate on this, but for lack of a better term, liberal Catholics will push this. It's an error to judge the morality acts by only considering the intentions. And I'm getting these notes straight out of the catechism. Okay. I have a quote in my notes here, which I won't read, but I'm taking my word for it. Catechism, paragraph 1756. What a lot of people want to do is they say, my intentions and the circumstances are the only thing that matter. Okay. Those are the only context. And there's no like intrinsically wrong activities like blasphemy and adultery and murder. That is completely false. Okay. So what liberals do is they want to say, my intentions and circumstances can change the moral quality of an evil act. That's not true at all. You will definitely run into this error, and you can authoritatively through the church answer that. That's probably a theme we'll definitely return to in the future, but I definitely wanted to include that at the end of our notes here. But before we wrap up, let's just review real quick and kind of tie a bow around this unit. All right. Abstractly speaking, right? Actions can be good, bad, or indifferent. But when we make choices, all of them are going to be good or bad. When you're judging a choice, you want to take into consideration what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the circumstances, because they're all important. When you guys are judging other people's actions, okay, which I'm actually we need to be cautious when we do this, okay? Why? Because usually what people are doing is pretty evident. Okay, so if you see a guy sitting on the sidewalk smoking crack, you can point your finger and go, that's bad. Okay, Jesus won't be mad about that. His intentions, though, I'm not saying it can make smoking crack good, but his intentions sometimes are unknown. Okay, it could be just to get pleasure. It could be other factors going on. So the intention is going to rise and lower his culpability, and so does his circumstances. Okay. So we do want to be cautious when we judge people morally because we don't have access to all the information we need. Okay. But Jesus is definitely not saying we can't judge at all. Okay. That's not true. And that doesn't line up with the rest of scripture. But now that you have an understanding of acts, intentions, and circumstances, you can see why being patient with people, being gracious with them is a really good thing to do. And this should also help you, make good choices yourself. But I think we're going to leave it there for this week. It's been a really cool month. The next couple months, we're going to talk about freedom of the will and what a conscience is, which will be really great stuff. But hope you guys have a great week. I'll talk to you next time.